Since Naughty Dog finally revealed a proper gameplay presentation for Last of Us Part 2 during Sony's E3 showcase, now might be the perfect opportunity to address how Naughty Dog is enhancing the sequel's combat and why it has the potential to set a new bar for combat encounters in video games as a whole. More importantly, I'd like to explain why Last of Us Part 2 could finally live up to a bold promise the original Last of Us attempted to live up to, but ultimately failed by a hair's breadth. Judging by the first look at the improved combat system, the successor seems to make the same promise again, and hopefully delivers this time. I truly believe that only a few small tweaks and changes to the combat system of the original could elevate Last of Us to new heights. But what exactly are those changes? Why is their impact so far-reaching, and what promise am I talking about? To answer those questions, we have to time travel to the year 2012, or to be more exact, to the first ever Last of Us gameplay demo at Sony's E3 2012 press conference. In many ways, this particular gameplay presentation marked a critical turning point for Naughty Dog as a studio and the video game industry. It may very well have been the moment Naughty Dog established itself as a versatile, world-class developer. Before the PlayStation 3 era, Naughty Dog was known for family-friendly, colorful jump-and-run platformers in the form of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. For two console generations, charming platformers were Naughty Dog's area of expertise, until they decided to dare a first major departure from their formula with Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. While it is true that the Uncharted franchise is quite a deviation from something like Jak and Daxter, I'd argue that the move from Uncharted to Last of Us was of even greater significance. In terms of genre departure, the step from a PlayStation 2 platformer to a full-fledged third-person shooter most definitely is more substantial than the jump from Uncharted to Last of Us. After all, both run in the same engine and are based on third-person gunplay mechanics. However, Uncharted and Jak and Daxter are still fairly similar in regards to their atmosphere and tone. Naughty Dog had approached a new genre and put great effort into modeling believable human beings instead of cartoony-looking talking animals. But Uncharted was still steeped in the light-hearted, humorous and colorful tone of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. That's not necessarily a weak point, quite the opposite. Uncharted's cheerful pulp adventure universe was a breath of fresh air during a time in which everyone was doubling down on gritty, pseudo-realistic shooters, dominated by the sparse color palette of grey and brown. But it certainly did raise a question. Is Naughty Dog able to tackle more serious and grounded subject matters? Thanks to Last of Us, this question was answered with a loud and clear yes. The tone between Uncharted and Last of Us couldn't be more different. The intimate and emotional character study of Joel and Ellie felt far removed from the over-the-top action spectacle of Uncharted. The phenomenal presentation and brilliantly written characters elevated the narrative quality to a level rarely reached by video games and turned Last of Us into one of the most beloved and celebrated games of all time. As a massive admirer of Last of Us, I can't help but agree with everyone calling it a masterpiece and one of the best games ever made. However, that doesn't mean I believe Last of Us is perfect. In fact, one important detail appears to have been lost in the flood of commercial and critical success. Namely, the correlation between the promise of the first gameplay demo and the final result in the game regarding combat encounters. We have to remember why people cheered in the middle of the gameplay presentation. A third-person survival game revolving around combat encounters with groups of human enemies? What's the big deal? Why were people losing their minds over this? Shooting and otherwise killing droves of soldiers, bandits or other types of standardized human enemies is about as ordinary and mundane as it gets. We've done it hundreds of times in hundreds of games. It's a common video game tradition. So what was all the fuss about? Why did The Last of Us gameplay manage to put a seasoned and experienced gaming audience on the edge of their seats? Well, to put it simple, they may have seen plenty of combat encounters in games, but never before in such gruesome intensity and tangibility. Each kill looked like an actual struggle. The enemies organized and behaved in a believable and complex fashion, and the overall presentation made violence more authentic and uncomfortable to watch than ever before. In short, for the first time the mainstream gaming audience was confronted with combat encounters featuring the illusion of actual human beings in a ruthless struggle for survival. The enemies in Last of Us weren't just numbers in a humanoid skin, they were more than your ordinary cannon fodder. While being awfully close to the desired goal, in the end the finished game couldn't replicate the AI fidelity of the initial demo. Naughty Dog delivered a game of mind-blowing quality. The character writing, the art design, the music, the graphical presentation. At the time, every single aspect set a new gold standard for linear story-driven games. In fact, to this day most developers struggle to reach the narrative quality and emotional impact of Last of Us. The one aspect Naughty Dog failed to push to the same standard as the rest of the game was the gameplay. The combat encounters were well crafted, and despite what some Naughty Dog critics claim, the overall gameplay experience is still good. But that's precisely the problem. Everything else about Last of Us is not just good, it's outstanding. Every once in a while the combat could actually end up being as intense and convincing as in the E3 demo, and many of the showcased gameplay elements made it to the final game. Ellie can save your ass in dicey moments, you can use enemies as human shields, and once in a blue moon the AI actually shows impressive behavior. In spite of that, it's undeniable that both enemy and companion AI suffer from an obvious downgrade if compared to the E3 presentation. For the most part, enemies still behave in typical video game fashion. They just keep running at you even when they are in a clear disadvantage. Stealth kills can still result in one giant body pile at the same spot because enemies always behave in the exact same way when they spot a fallen comrade. And in the majority of cases, human enemies in Last of Us don't coordinate their attacks as intelligently as the demo made us believe.
Got you now, asshole! Shoot him! Hold him still!
In a worst case scenario, companion AI could be completely immersion breaking, stomping like a herd of elephants directly in front of a brain-dead enemy while you are doing your best to be as sneaky as possible. Long story short, Last of Us is a near perfect game, apart from the combat. Which leads me to the main topic of this video and the promise Last of Us failed to keep. The first game came pretty close to Naughty Dog's original vision, especially in light of the severe hardware limitations near the end of the PlayStation 3's life cycle. However, a couple of design flaws as well as hardware limitations prevented Last of Us to reach its full potential gameplay-wise. The video game community was dazzled and mesmerized by the first gameplay reveal because it promised to break free from the convention of totally disposable and identical-looking droves of human enemies. Even games that deem themselves grounded and realistic suffer from the same impersonal collective. The player is never dealing with individuals, it never feels like you just killed a unique, individual human being with an identity separate from the collective. Every time a bullet finds its target, it's exactly that and nothing more, a target. You just killed one of many, no reason to dwell on it. Of course, we have to judge each game on an individual basis. Not all games want you to contemplate every single kill. Uncharted, for instance, continues the tradition of pulp adventure stories, defined by a clear separation between good and evil. Nathan, Elena and Sully are our lovable bunch of heroes, getting in the way of unmistakably evil villains like pirates, Russian warlords and Nazis. Last of Us, on the other hand, takes place in a very different universe, a post-apocalyptic world that brings along questions of moral ambiguity. Moral ambiguity was certainly a vital part of the narrative, but the combat by and large regressed to hordes of enemies you don't really care about, and slaughtering them didn't have the same gut-wrenching effect as in the E3 gameplay demo. The promise the combat system of Last of Us entailed, at least for me, was to capture the same tension, authenticity and uncomfortable intimacy of violent encounters in movies of the same nature. A death in a video game that's trying to implement gritty realism into its narrative usually doesn't carry the same weight as a death in movies of this type. Excluding cutscenes, of course, which adhere to the same rules as a scene in a movie anyway. After seeing the first gameplay presentation for Last of Us Part 2 and witnessing the improved combat system in all its glory, I'm extremely hopeful that Naughty Dog is finally able to live up to their original vision regarding combat encounters, provided that the enemy AI doesn't receive another downgrade once the final game hits the shelves, and this time Naughty Dog has confirmed in several interviews that the enemy interaction we saw in the demo is the real deal. Last of Us Part 2 could be the watershed moment I'm asking for. Thanks to the experience Naughty Dog has gathered over the last 5 years and the drastically improved technical capabilities they are now able to utilize, Last of Us Part 2 appears to be ready to turn each and every combat encounter into an impactful and gut-wrenching confrontation, in total accordance with the narrative tone. The way I see it, Last of Us Part 2 must overcome two crucial challenges in order to reach this goal. First and foremost, Naughty Dog has to overcome a tremendous technical challenge, demanding a level of quality in animation and enemy AI vastly exceeding the talent of most developers out there. In order to leave behind the concept of lifeless enemy crowds and sell the illusion of shockingly realistic human behavior to today's progressively spoiled and jaded gaming community, it requires the absolute best animation work in the business and highly advanced AI. The animations in the first Last of Us were already impressive. However, the game still relied on pre-rendered cutscenes to display detailed facial expressions. Naturally, the facial animations of a random enemy during actual gameplay didn't match the detail and believability of his cutscene counterpart. Today, Naughty Dog has abandoned pre-rendered cutscenes and is able to display an incredible spectrum of human emotions in mind-blowing detail in-game. Much to the amusement of Naughty Dog's world-class animation team, the studio head of Eidos Montreal accused the animations shown off in the E3 demo as being fake. I guess there is no greater compliment for an animator than a fellow professional who accuses your work to be fake because it simply looks too damn good to be true. You can criticize whatever you want about Naughty Dog, but in regards to industry-defining animation work, this studio is beyond dispute at the top of the food chain. Since Uncharted 1, they've perfected the animation of human beings to a level no one can rival. When Ellie wounds an enemy, you can see the pain on his face. When she kills an enemy, you can see the fear the moment before she strikes. The detailed facial animations on normal enemies are absolutely baffling and definitely reinforce the feeling that you are dealing with real human beings. But facial animations are just one ingredient. Realistic and fluent body movement has also been improved. I guess the chief aim of animation artists is to create animations that seem completely seamless. In that regard, the animation work in Last of Us Part 2 is out of this world. Naughty Dog included tons of context-sensitive animations and inverse kinematics. Apparently they built a specific set of animation for dodging into objects like walls and car doors, which makes perfect sense for a melee system that often takes takes place in close quarters. It's also a nice little detail to see actual momentum behind attacks. Normally, after a successful swing, your character goes back to the idle pose. However, notice the momentum and weight behind Ellie's finishing swing. It seems to force her into some sort of recovery stance. The same rule applies for the big baddie with the hammer. The attention to detail Naughty Dog added to make gruesome combat encounters believable in terms of animation is beyond everything I've seen thus far. Here are just a few more examples. The demo also includes impressive cloth simulation, dynamics on gun straps, bullet hit animations for each individual bullet, detailed foliage interaction. The list goes on and on. Of all the challenges Naughty Dog has to overcome, mind-blowing animation work is the least of my concerns. They're never disappointed on that front. A far more pressing issue is an overhauled AI system. After all, enemy and companion AI were the biggest letdown of the predecessor. However, the information Naughty Dog has shared concerning the improved enemy AI is reason to be hopeful. We won't know for certain until the game is finished, but it seems Naughty Dog is its own worst critic and hellbent on not doing the same mistake again. Judging by the behavior we can observe in the demo, enemy AI finally seems to be advanced enough to support complex collaboration. Here are a handful of impressive results. Enemies don't seem to follow regular path locomotion. They're checking potential hiding places and cooperate on a quite complex level with their comrades. Moreover, the AI doesn't seem to move at a uniform speed. Their speed is changing on a regular basis. To humanize them even further, they are now addressing each other by name and constantly communicate with each other. This one is really important for me personally. Enemies have no auto-telepathic awareness of you once you are spotted. In Uncharted 4 this was still the case, much to the annoyance of the player. The new system is referred to as systematic check-ins of AI information. They pass information to each other more realistically, to let new groups and enemies know of the unfolding situation or of your position. So, to add realism, Naughty Dog decided to dispatch the magical ability of all enemies to know exactly where you are, although only one member of the group spotted you, while at the same time increasing the collaboration skills of the AI to seek the player out. In a game like Last of Us, whose primary goal is to be hyper-realistic in its overall tone and combat encounters, it seems like a wise decision to give the player the feeling that enemy and player are mostly on equal footing in their ability to spot each other. So much for the technical challenge Naughty Dog has to overcome. The second major challenge concerns gameplay mechanics. Since Last of Us takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, gameplay mechanics should revolve around reinforcing a sense of desperate survival. To put it simply, Last of Us 2 has to put us in the shoes of the characters. Ellie finds herself in a ruthless, morally degenerate world where each day is harder than the next and naked survival is paramount. The overall gameplay experience should reflect this feeling. The easy and normal difficulty settings of the original Last of Us did a poor job in mediating this feeling, due to the fact that the player never really experiences a lack of resources. I'd advise anyone to play Last of Us on either hard or survival, and most importantly, disable the hearing mode. The hearing mode was a questionable design decision if you ask me. Since Arkham Asylum, each game apparently needs some sort of detective mode, but I'm afraid in Last of Us it destroys a big part of the tension. Not knowing who's waiting around the next corner is an asset for a game like Last of Us. The hearing mode undercut the suspense. Ultimately, I'm not holding the hearing mode and abundance of ammo against the game, since you can simply pick one of the higher difficulty settings and disable the hearing mode. Ammo Ammo scarcity should be a vital part of Last of Us 2, since it forces the player to consider tactical retreat in order to pick up weapons and ammo from previously killed opponents and reorganize himself in the environment. This way we are one step closer to the initial Last of Us gameplay demo. Every bullet should count and enemies should have to deal with the same limitations. If they empty an entire magazine, they should be forced to attack with a melee weapon or pick up ammo from one of their fallen comrades. To this day I don't understand why enemies in Last of Us almost never drop ammo. Instead you find it in shelves and drawers, which should have been looted a long time ago. Wouldn't it be more beneficial for the gameplay experience to add another tactical element by encouraging the player to take out certain enemies first in order to obtain specific ammo types or weapons? Another aspect I have to criticize quite harshly is the lack of stealth options in a game generally based on suspenseful combat encounters, in which stealth should be a viable option to get an advantage and plan your attacks more carefully. I mean, Uncharted 4 provides better stealth options than Last of Us. That's kinda ridiculous. Improved stealth options are a no-brainer for a sequel. Fortunately, the demo showcased quite a number of nice additions to Ellie's stealth abilities, including a prone moveset, the option to squeeze into tight gaps allowing you to surprise an enemy, and crawl under vehicles. In addition, Naughty Dog added a dodge mechanic, a jump button, different ammo types, more open level structures offering verticality and different ways to engage in a fight, and it was also confirmed that you are not automatically fully hidden in grass. The extent of your visibility depends on height and density of the foliage. All of this should open up a greater variety of tactical options and hopefully makes rooms full of knee-high boxes a thing of the past. Besides, the fact that Ellie is the main playable character should force the player to be far more sneaky and planning from the get-go. With Joel you always had the option to go in guns blazing and beat someone to a pulp with your bare fists. Because Ellie is a fragile young woman and she finds herself at a natural disadvantage whenever she engages in a fight with a male survivor, avoiding detection and careful planning will be of even greater importance. To sum up, Last of Us Part 2 seems to set its priorities right. If Naughty Dog can maintain the narrative quality of the first game and finally deliver on the promise of the first ever gameplay demo so many years ago, the sequel could be just as impactful and relevant. I'm sure we will find out more about the game in the near future. I still believe that a summer 2019 release date is likely, which means Last of Us Part 2 could be Sony's marquee title for E3 2019. A lot of fans are counting on Naughty Dog. For now, all we can do is wait. God damn it.
See, I told you. He should be terrified.
This video turned out to be way longer than I originally intended. I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless and feel inclined to leave behind a like or subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. As always, please tell me what you admired or hated about the first Last of Us and what you would like to see in the sequel. Till next time.